This next artwork by Raphael is one that I think you'll be very excited to learn more about. It is Raphael's Philosophy, also known by the nickname the School of Athens. And we'll get into why it's called the School of Athens in a little bit. Now I've highlighted here Stanza della Signatura because that is the room in which this painting is in. And the Stanza della Signatura is in the Vatican Palace in Rome, in Italy. Now notice too that this is a fresco, so this is painted on plaster. And we're looking at the wall that has been painted as the School of Athens, or philosophy. To give you a better frame of reference, here it is in the room. The room is a four-sided rectangle. There are doors at two sides. There's a door here and then a door over there. And the entire room is one in a series on this inside of the Vatican Palace. Now, Raphael was hired to paint the interior of the Stanza della Signatura as well as three other rooms. These four rooms were going to be used as administrative or office space for the Pope. And we know the intention of this room because it's in the name. Stanza della Signatura means the room of signatures. This room would have been filled with office furniture, bookcases, desks, and it would have been where the Pope signed his official decrees, his papal bulls. So the room where he would use his signature, signatura. Now obviously these rooms are open to the public as part of the Vatican Museum, and the original furniture has been removed. I want us to experience this space, and so I'm going to show a video of how we would be standing in this room and how large this space is. In addition to the School of Athens, there are roundels above, and there are paintings also done by Raphael on decorating the three other sides. Just opposite the School of Athens, or philosophy, is theology. And we see Jesus surrounded by saints. So we have philosophy balanced by theology. And then on the shorter sides, we have poetry and the arts, which is balanced by law and justice. So we're going to walk around, or we're going to swing around this space, and then we're going to talk about the larger composition and then focus back in on the specific wall that has philosophy. So you can see the paintings are placed above eye level. The figures within the paintings, those that are in the foreground, are almost the exact same size as us. So they're almost life size. That's theology. So these figures in the foreground are life size. That's justice and law. And then the arts, poetry, song, music. So now let's think about what we know about balance and logic of the Renaissance and this composition that is placed here. What we have is faith, or theology, and it's balanced by philosophy, thought. So we have faith and thought. And then on those smaller sides, we have a balance of justice and rule and order with art and beauty and romance, things that sometimes don't make any sense or have any justice to them, right? So we have a balance of opposites along this wall. Now let's think about what would be the reason the Pope would want all of these elements in one room. What does it say about the Pope, who would be signing documents, laws, decrees in this room? Well, if it's balanced in composition, then he too is balanced. He's a balanced ruler, leader. He's of a balanced mind. Oh. Okay, well now let's look further into the School of Athens. When we look at this space, it's called the School of Athens as a nickname because it is populated with philosophers, many of which were born and alive and thrived in the ancient Greek city of Athens. Now, when we think of the School of Athens, it sounds like a lot of fun, but these men, these philosophers, they were not all alive in Athens at the same time. So this is a fictional reality. It's not that this could have ever happened. Some of these men were alive hundreds of years before others that are also included in this scene. So it's a fantastical idea of these many philosophers gathered here together. When we look at the space, we see this grand architecture. Grand, important people deserve grand, important architecture. And these two giant statues would be identified as Apollo, god of the arts, and Minerva, or Athena, her Greek name, and she is the goddess of wisdom. So these figures are framed by the arts and wisdom, the art of debate, the art of discussion, the art of math and science. Okay, so wisdom and the arts. Now our eye is immediately drawn to the center, and then from there we're encouraged to move through the space in these smaller clusters of figures. And that's what we're going to do together. We're going to look at the overall composition, but we're also going to focus in on these smaller elements and then understand what message is being presented here. But there's a greater question we should ask. Why does the Pope have paintings of Greek gods and scholars on his walls? He's a Christian leader, and he's not there to worship Greek gods, right? The answer is in the concepts of humanism and Neoplatonism. Humanism, the emphasis on education and expanding knowledge, especially of classical antiquity. The exploration of individual potential with the desire to excel and a commitment to civic responsibility and moral duty. Now, there are many ways that we could define humanism. For the broader term, ism means a philosophy or study. Human. So the philosophy or the study of being human. And for our class, we are going to minimize our discussion of humanism to simply look at an emphasis on education and expanding knowledge. In reference to the Pope, he's going to want to show that he is highly educated, and his education includes a breadth of knowledge such as the philosophers of the ancient world. Additionally, the exploration of individual potential with the desire to excel and a commitment to civic responsibility and moral duty. How does that relate to the Pope? Well, his individual potential as a leader of the Christian church in Western Europe, his potential and greatness is meant to better the rest of the world. Now let's look at the other concept. Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism simply means new, neo, Plato, the philosopher Plato, ism. So the new take on Plato. What? It's based on the ideas presented by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. And again, we could get into a larger debate if this was a philosophy class, but for how we are going to look at artworks, our definition of Neoplatonism is looking at and contemplating beautiful objects, especially those of antiquity, and sacred images in architecture will lead one's soul into a closer union with the divine. Huh? Miss Cortez, you totally lost me. So Plato argues that beauty will help humanity. More specifically, that contemplating the beauty and harmony of these specific objects, architecture, songs, poetry, imagery, those can help to refine the human to be more balanced, to be more pure, to be more beautiful and harmonious. So these beautiful paintings around the Pope are not then to be seen as wasteful or unnecessary. They will enrich those who view upon them. Oh. Now, it just so happens that Plato, his Neoplatonism, well, guess what? Plato's in here. Ah, yeah. So the two figures in the center of this painting are in fact Plato and his student Aristotle. Now, as I said, we're going to be walking through this in a more detailed look. So let's start. Here, this is a zoom in detail. Plato and Aristotle are in the center of this scene. Plato's the older man and his younger student Aristotle. And what are they doing together? What's going on? They're lost in a conversation. They're talking to each other. And then we know our rules of Renaissance paintings. We should look at gestures, right? So what are their gestures here? Well, Plato's pointing up, and Aristotle's got his hand kind of gesturing down. And then they're each holding books. The books they're holding, let me see if I can zoom in further. Ah, nice. Okay. The books that they're holding are the books that they wrote. Plato holds his book, Timaeus. And his book Timaeus is about the universe and the heavens. Aristotle holds the book he wrote called Ethics. Ethics is about, well, the ethics of humanity and civic duties of man. And then thinking about their gestures. So Plato's book is about the universe. He's pointing up. And Aristotle's is about humanity, things here on earth. And so here they are arguing their points that are addressed further in their books. So they're lost in this kind of conversation together. If we were to then move through the scene here, this next cluster, we see an older man, bald, and he's surrounded by these figures who are all listening, and he's gesturing, and he's perhaps counting on his fingers. So they're in a talk right now. This man is very distinctive. He's got a bald head and a little pug nose and this heavy brow. Now, I'm not being mean or rude or calling him out or anything like that. These are very distinctive features of Socrates. Socrates was described this way. And so we're like, I'm smart. I'm here in the Pope's room. I'm highly educated. I can tell. That's Socrates. And what's Socrates doing? Well, he's in the middle of this discussion. Have any of you heard or been a part of Socratic method discussion? Maybe one of your other classes, your instructor has gathered you into groups and let's do Socratic method and talk about this. Socratic method is in which the leader will present a question, and then as a group you discuss the question and you try to come up with answers. Socratic method is named after Socrates. And look what he's doing. He's asking questions. He's leading the discussion through Socratic method. So imagine that we're here in the Pope's Stanza della Signatura, and we're like, yes, so clever, so clever. If we were to move forward in this cluster, what we're looking at are figures who are sketching, they're writing things down, and they're all referencing back at this man here. And then, look at, there's like a chalkboard. Ooh, what's going on? We would recognize this as the Greek philosopher and mathematician Pythagoras. You know of Pythagoras. Pythagorean method, the idea of a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's that guy. It's named after him, Pythagoras. And so here Pythagoras is leading a lesson, and he's writing out his ideas. And then look at this student over here. Move a little bit. This guy right here, he's like, oh, is this right? Is this right? And then others looking around, trying to catch it. Okay, we figured it out. So Pythagoras is leading a lesson. And then if we were to go to the opposite side, we see another lesson being led. We see these men hunched over this guy who's got an architectural compass, and they're holding globes, celestial bodies, the earth. What we're looking at here is a lesson by none other than the Greek mathematician Euclid. Now, you know Euclid because you have taken geometry. Okay, I know. You either love geometry or you hate geometry, right? Well, if you love geometry, you can thank this guy. If you hate geometry, you can blame this guy. Raphael has presented here a lesson on geometry, which is these shapes, these three-dimensional objects. In fact, he's emphasized geometry and the study and math of shape with these balls. Look at that. So he's had the figure of Euclid bend down. Yep, showing off a complicated pose. And also, he makes that bald head into one of those orbs, echoing the study of geometry. What else? Well, who's this guy? He's just like sitting right there in the middle of this bustling scene, and nobody's really paying attention to him, and he doesn't care. He doesn't move for anybody. What is going on? Well, if we were very familiar with Greek philosophy, we would immediately recognize this man as the philosopher Diogenes. Diogenes was a critic of culture or cultural conventions. He said that virtue should be found in action and not theory. Stop talking, stop yapping, start doing. He chose to live a life of poverty. He was known to kind of slum around Athens. He even reportedly lived in a large terracotta pipe just, on the side of the road. And he was extremely brilliant, but he was also a big pain in the butt to all the other philosophers living at that time. It was said that he would go into the theater where Socrates and Plato were, discussing these grand ideas, and they had a big audience. He'd come into the theater and he'd listen, and he'd find a flaw in their argument, and he'd shout, "What about the blah, 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 blah?" And he'd shout his idea that would totally throw off their argument, and then he'd walk out. And then Socrates and Plato would be like, "Diogenes, you brat!" So here we see him. He doesn't care. He's just like sitting up there, whatever. He was a pain in the butt, but he was also extremely intelligent. Now there's also another isolated figure in this scene. This one here. He too doesn't have anybody engaged around him. He seems to be brooding, isolated. His face is in shadow. He looks down from his work in deep contemplation. He's very strong. He's got this big, heavy body. He's got this messy, curly brown hair and unkempt beard. He's got a crooked nose. Obviously, it was broken at some point. This figure, this here is the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. Now, Heraclitus once stated that the only thing that doesn't change is change itself. The only thing that we can rely upon is that things will change. And then with this concept that nothing stays the same, that everything changes, comes this pessimistic view of reality, Why invest in anything when things change? Why fall in love when love changes? Why have anything that is sacred or important when things will always change? Heraclitus was known to have been an isolated figure, and he would kind of remove himself from the city at times to write and contemplate on humankind. And so it makes sense that Raphael would create a figure that is isolated and contemplative. The characteristics of this figure, though: curly hair, big broad shoulders, strong muscles, broken nose. If we were alive during the time that Raphael is painting this, he would look very familiar. You know why? Because he looks exactly like Michelangelo. What? Michelangelo? Raphael, why are you painting Michelangelo in here? Well, first of all, Heraclitus, he has very similar personality traits as Michelangelo. Michelangelo was known to be a pessimist and to always kind of be brooding and isolated. Also, Raphael is no fool. Raphael knows Michelangelo is a genius. And guess what? At this time, while Raphael is painting this series of rooms in Vatican Palace, right here. So Raphael's hanging out over here, right? Michelangelo is in the Sistine Chapel, just across the courtyard. So we have two extremely famous, talented artists working for the Pope at the exact same time. Now, as the story goes, Raphael, who was younger than Michelangelo, he was just a big fan of Michelangelo, and he wanted to meet Michelangelo. And Raphael, he is just so handsome, and he's so charming. I mean, he can charm anybody except Michelangelo. So Raphael's like, I would love to see your work in the Sistine Chapel. And Michelangelo's like, no, I don't want anybody in there. Out. And so every night, Michelangelo would lock all the doors to the chapel so nobody could go inside. So Raphael's like, I really want to see his work. So he charms one of the guards outside of the locked doors, convinces the guard to unlock the door, and then he goes in with his torch, climbs up the scaffolding, and he sees Michelangelo's ceiling, and he's like, oh, yes, this is amazing. And so then he goes back down the scaffolding. Thanks, dude, thanks. And he gets back into painting the philosophy wall, and he paints Heraclitus as Michelangelo as a way to honor Michelangelo and the genius that Michelangelo is. Now, I think that's really fun and great, but you know Raphael, he can't resist. He also includes a selfie. There's Raphael. He's also in the School of Athens. Hey! Now, there's a lot more that I could say about Raphael's School of Athens or philosophy. There's a lot more figures that we could identify, but we're not going to get into it. If you want to know more about this, there's plenty of scholarship and literature. Email me and I can share that with you.